This is Top Story with Evans Mensah.
Always brought to you by Vodafone. Tonight, the real-life consequence of Finance Minister's continuous stay in office despite being unanimously rejected by his own party MPs and that of the minority is beginning to take its toll. Yesterday, MPP majority MPs met and decided they will not entertain any business from the Finance Ministry in Parliament as long as it is done in the name of Ofori-Atta. Already, NDC MPs have triggered censure proceedings to force him out. In effect, the Finance Minister is an unwelcome entity in Parliament. Tonight, it is emerging that critical funding needed for several hospitals across the country to save lives and to fix the broken Accra-Kumasi transmission lines that will guarantee reliable power supply for the people of the Ashanti region worth more than 213 million euros will become the first major casualty of this impasse with MPs. The Finance Minister has been scheduled to go before Parliament to ask for the release of funds through a combination of tax waivers and a concession loan agreement. It is now proving impossible to secure those funds as the MPs insist they will not do business with him. Listen to the MPP MP for Asante Achim North, Andy Apia Kubi, speaking to me last night after their majority caucus had a meeting on the matter.
We reaffirmed the old position that Ofori-Atta must go. So we are still where we are. Okay. We've gone back to sack him now. And therefore, we expect that some action be taken in respect of relieving him of his position. We have also told the President that if he is not relieved of his position, we shall not cooperate or work with him or participate in anything that he brings to Parliament. And that position is where we are right now.
So that last bit, when you say anything that he brings, that is anything that is brought in the name of the executive president?
Under the hand of the Finance Minister, we will not participate. Okay. Because as far as we are concerned, we are not going to do business with him. And if we are not going to do business with him, he does not participate in any process from the presidency to the House. We will not participate in deliberations on it.
If another minister comes to the floor, say education minister, energy minister, although they are coming on the authority of the president, you will hear them, you will do business with them.
We will so do, because we are not saying that we will do president business, but we will not do president business through Mr. Ofori-Atta.
What is going to happen if he shows up on the budget presentation day?
If he is the person to come to Parliament with the budget, we will not attend to him. And therefore, he will speak to those who will sit. But we, as members of that group of 98 now, we will not attend to him.
So the position is that you will boycott the budget presentation if it is him who is presenting it?
If it is him who is presenting it, we will not be part. And we will not sit for him to present.
Has this position been formally communicated to the president who appointed him?
We have communicated this to the leadership of the majority. So we have done our best. It is for a majority because the majority adopted our position from their first press conference. And for now, we believe that communication through the leadership of the majority is adequate information to the presidency and anybody who is a stakeholder.
Do you understand the frustration about this whole process around Ofori-Atta at the time that we are in an economic crisis? Do you understand that frustration?
Oh, we do, and we think that also that it is not necessary at all that we come to this position. But what we say, how did it happen? Now, put together the process of censure and the process of appeal to president to relieve him. It speaks to the world that the whole House says that we would not, the House would not do business with him. So whose fault? Well, if one wing is saying that we won't do business through this guy, what stops the executive wing of also acceding to the request of the legislative wing, because now we have a situation of the whole parliament refusing to do business with one person from the executive. So, as far as we are concerned, we appreciate the frustration, but the frustration is needless and it could be avoided, and it has to be avoided.
I want to take you to Parliament right now, where we're beginning to get a first sense of the impact of the decision that has been taken largely now by both sides of the House, 98 MPP MPs and all of the NDC MPs. Now, they won't do business with the Finance Ministry. My colleague, Kweku Asante, has been looking at the list of very critical government business items that will be affected because they stand in the name of Ken Ofori-Atta. Kweku, and we're looking at the list, and some of them jump at you.
You are coming to sign,
some
right?
of them have to do with the provision and construction of hospital facilities across the country in places where people lack those facilities, life-saving facilities.
Right, Evans. Indeed, about 6 such businesses have now been listed on the other paper. 3 of them are key ones having to do with export, import duties that are being waived for the construction of some of these health facilities. Let me run you by a number of them. This one is a request for waiver, and it lists all the waivers of 12,938,000 euros on materials and equipment required to be procured for the construction of an 80-bed district hospital at Osiem, Asin Kushie, and Kutre number 2, and also a 40-bed polyclinic at Doma Akwemu, and the upgrading of one Fie polyclinic. That is about 12 million euros in export and import waivers for the construction of these health facilities in the aforementioned areas. There's also another about 37 million euros for the Efian Kwanta Hospital. And we've heard about how that hospital is not in a good state and government having promised to refurbish it. Then there is another 16 million euros for the rehabilitation and expansion of the Sekendi Sakrade water supply project. So these 3 ones that I've mentioned have to do with this request of waiver of import duties for the construction of either hospitals, polyclinics, or this key water supply project in the Sekendi Sakrade.
And Kweku, last year, we remember the energy minister touring the country, going to Kumasi, where we had agitation because of the unreliable nature of the power supply there. And I remember the energy minister saying it is because of the faulty transmission lines. We're now learning that the finance minister is now being scheduled now to move and ask Parliament for the release of some funds through a concession loan agreement to fix that particular problem that will guarantee supply of power for the people of the Ashanti region, Kumasi, to be very specific. That is also now in jeopardy.
Indeed, Evans. Government is seeking 116 million euros in concessional loan agreement between government and KfW Frankfurt for the changing of this transmission line project between Accra and Kumasi. And indeed, today, when all these were listed on the other paper and were supposed to be moved on the floor, the conversation around this was that this is such an urgent business that government wanted Parliament to consider it expeditiously so that government can source this key 116 million euros to finance this transmission line project between Accra and Kumasi.
And all these items you've mentioned, they all stand in his name specifically, the finance minister, correct?
Indeed, there's an additional 30 million as part of government's efforts to change the power mix to solar energy. So there's about 30 million concessional loans that government is seeking to do a solar project. All these agreements, loans, either concessional loans or waiver of import duties, stand in the name of Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta. Indeed, today when sitting started and Majority Chief Whip Frank Anodom-Prep was expected to give an indication of how business was to go, when it was time to talk about this, he told the speaker that the discussion around it wasn't ready. It wasn't clear what exactly he meant by things aren't ready. And the speaker had to move on to attend to other business before they came for these papers to be laid and referred to the Finance Committee.
So the understanding is that definitely, as we've had Apia Kubi explain there, and this is a member of the NPP explained there, they won't do business with him. And we know the majority position already. That clearly indicates that if the panel, of course, first of all, it becomes difficult to see how he shows up to try and ask the members of parliament to do this when they've clearly said publicly that they wouldn't do this. Do we have any idea if and when what has been tabled and printed may come for some discussion? Because the budget is just what, next week?
Next week, 24th.
Any idea when these will come?
What happened was that this was ultimately referred to the Finance Committee. Our indication is that the Finance Committee is expected to sit and consider these papers that the Finance Minister has laid. He wasn't able to do so himself. His deputies did so on his behalf. Our understanding is that the majority NPP MPs on the committee will boycott the discussion. Of course, that would mean that the minority will have a quorum to continue. But if you leave government business in the hands of the minority, then you may never know what exactly will happen. So the Finance Committee will be expected to consider this, either both sides or only the minority on the committee. And then a report will be expected to be presented to the House as early as next week before the budget comes, before these numbers are all factored in the appropriation. So if this does not happen, then all these key projects are in limbo, and the minority would have to take a decision on this alone. And we know they don't have the numbers to be able to take decisions in Parliament.
And a slightly related subject, still on the Ken Ofori-Atta, and that whole issue around him, yesterday we know spilled over and led to a pretty public clash between the majority leader and Ken Ofori-Atta's lawyer, Gabi Asare-Dako, in which we had the majority leader on a radio station in the Ashanti region challenging Gabi Asare-Dako, daring him, questioning his locus. This is Chairman Sabonsu.
Who does he think he is? That's what you say. Me, I go for another sum. The some party no some MPP are buying. Just say the any pay and just say, oh no, who are buying? No, yeah, can't government and kasa. What's your locus? What can the Chairman Sabonsu the chassis? I don't know.
And Kweku understand that there has been some smoking of the peace pipe here.
Indeed, Evans, this morning we had indication that the majority leader was expected to meet some high-level government officials to try and discuss this. Indeed, the Deputy Minister for Local Government, Obi Amwa, together with Jojo Obin-Rocky, the Western North Regional Minister, in the company of Gabi Asare-Dako, before Parliament started sitting, came to see the majority leader. This was closed doors. We're trying to get an indication of what exactly was discussed. What our sources tell us that the main issue on the agenda was Gabi's effort to try and reconcile with the majority leader. He is said to have denied having said any of the things that the majority leader has accused him of saying. But nevertheless, he said that in the interest of the party coming together, he was offering his sincere apologies. Indeed, at the end of the day, the majority leader accepted the apologies and pledged that they were going to work on that. But another information we are taking is that, Andy Appiah-Kubi told you yesterday that the decision not to allow Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta present the budget and consider any of his business has now been referred to the majority leadership. This is something that came up for discussion, and Gabi Asare-Dako, not only as a key player in the New Patriotic Party, but also as lawyer for Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta, will be having some conversations with the president, who is outside the country, to try and reach some sort of compromise. They have just about a week before the finance minister is expected to present the budget. Will the president allow him go and face what will be an obvious embarrassment, or government will go the route of 2021 when the majority leader was allowed to present the budget? And so the president would have to now nominate someone from among his ministers, if he is so minded, to present the budget. That is, if he does not want to sack Ofori-Atta in the immediate. So that conversation also came up, and Gabi is expected to have some sort of conversation with both parties, carry the message from Parliament to the presidency as some sort of a conveyor belt for an agreement to be reached as early as the end of this week.
Remarkable. Thank you very much, Kweku, for that. Let's stay on this a while longer. I want to bring in Professor Godfred Bokwing, who joins us on the telephone line right now. Also joining me is he's a professor of finance, obviously, and also Professor Lord Mensah, both of them professors of finance, joining me right now on another angle to this conversation, equally even more important, because the very survival of this economy rests on that particular aspect. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time here on Top Story.
Yes, good evening. Good evening to your cherished listeners.
Before I even come to you on why I brought you in, yesterday, Ken Ofori-Atta's own lawyer, Gabi Asare-Otredako, suggested that his client's current predicament before Parliament's ad hoc committee hearing the censure motion may affect the finance minister's work as it relates to the preparation of the 2023 budget and the negotiations that are currently going on with the IMF to secure a bailout. This is Gabi Asare-Otredako yesterday.
The list that have been provided does not include the ordinary danger that we pointed out. If we are not careful, there will be surprises at every turn of these proceedings. And as we sit here, the Finance Minister of the Republic has a responsibility to be working on the budget, to be negotiating on the IMF program that the whole country is waiting for. And if we're going to stay here and spring surprises at every turn, Mr. Chairman, it may be difficult for us.
He ends there by saying it may be difficult for us. Professor Bokwing, how does this whole drama surrounding the finance minister affect our ability as a country to secure an IMF bailout? Because he's leading this negotiation on our behalf.
This is it's unfortunate, and I say it's unfortunate because it adds to the economic uncertainty. I think the finance minister should just resign. The reason I'm saying so is that the market has moved on. I'm not too sure his continuous stay in the office really adds to much now. Let me put it that way, because I think he should have resigned long ago. I think his posture in the run-up to the call to the IMF, I don't know. I'm thinking that our honorable finance minister is an honorable person. He has achieved a lot in life. Probably he meant well for this country. As the first African to testify at the U.S. Congress Ways and Means Committee to support the AGOA, someone who has received honors twice from Pricewaterhouse as one of the top 5 most respected CEOs in Ghana. Someone who has seen life across different angles. I want to believe that he should look at what he has done in life. He should look at it that this country is bigger than any individual, is bigger than the president himself. He should look at what the country is going through. He should look at the bigger picture, the common good. And I believe that he will find fulfillment, that, yes, I've done my part. My time has come. Maybe I'm living on borrowed time. Maybe this is the time to go. He needs to save the country further embarrassment. It doesn't help. I have held the view that where the country has gotten to requires fresh ideas, fresh insights, someone who can build bridges, someone who can appeal to both the opposition, somebody who is credible. The market can trust the person largely. And I think Ken at this stage doesn't have that. I think that negotiating with the IMF is more than just being an investment banker. I think he's not at that level. Beyond that, I think that so many things have happened, and I want to believe that he missed the important point. And when I say so, he should have taken advantage of the U-turn the government made on the 1st of July and probably resign on principle that, I don't believe in going to the IMF. And if the president has made that decision, I am resigning. That would be more that would have been more respectable. But I think I don't know how to put it, but I would just want to plead with him that his time is up.
Yeah.
He's on borrowed time, and he should give the country a chance to recover.
Let me bring in your colleague, Professor Lord Mensah, into this. Prof, so the IMF conversation is still happening. I mean, you listened to Gabi Ochedako there yesterday. He says, listen, him being here before the committee alone, it taking him away from that job of negotiating a deal for us. I wonder, in real terms though, with all everything that's happening around him, if he sits around the table with the IMF guys, leading our talks with them, how much of a role is he himself taking though in this, and does his involvement now become a distraction and possibly one that could delay our ability to secure a deal?
Yeah, Evans, good evening to our listeners, and good evening to my colleague for Sabopin at the other end. I think to the point where majority forms part of the finance minister's calls for exit. I think the market has come to understand that the economic cost of keeping the finance minister is higher than getting him off the scent, and that is the point we have gotten to. So whether he leaves the IMF or not, we have come to understand that his cost of keeping his position is more than probably the benefit that he can give the country if he keeps his position. And that is why there is a call for his head. This is a finance minister that historically, whether he is committed to the government policies or not, we have the same finance minister who told us that he is not for free education. The same finance minister at a point in time gave the signal that we have what it takes not to go to IMF. Of course, he's the one sitting by the numbers. As I sit here as a researcher and a lecturer, I may not have the same information that he has. Or even if we have the same levels of information, the strength of the information he has is more than me because he's the manager of the economy. So for me, it has gotten to a point where whether Mr. Gabi Ochedako argues that he has a lot to do out there or not, now we are telling him that his position is more costlier than the benefit he's giving the country. And that is why we call him for his head. So he should understand that there is an economic cost for him to keep his position. And more so, the longer he prolongs that, that cost, the more, it will be at the detriment of the country. And so, how I wish we would not have gotten to this, point. Because it's like we are overstretching our constitution. A constitution that gives the finance minister an opportunity to be heard in case, there's a vote of, censure on him. Those, details were more or less kind of last minute. And I believe that we have overstretched it. And the more we prolong this, the uncertainty on this country. Look, we were supposed to read budget on the 15th, which was yesterday. Now we've moved it to, 24th, which is about 10 days delay.
Even that is
I can tell you that
tonight.
in economics, or even 9 days or 10 days, it's approximately almost the same. I can tell you that in economics, you can't take even a day of an economic uncertainty into consideration. So for me, I think the finance minister should bounce.
Professor Buckwing, if you can do this very briefly for me. In these negotiations with the IMF, though, is it the finance minister who takes the lead? I mean, what I mean is, isn't it the case that other technical individuals and people, consultants we've hired are the ones who are actually doing the real work, and that he is just simply, showing his face and leaving, and that he can, do other things, such as is happening before the committee, and the process will still go on and unaffected?
Well, for any other person, we could make some allowance for that. But for Ken in particular, and his posture, and his performance, and his handling of the economy, I think that all of that matter. The IMF deals with authorities, basically the Ministry of Finance, and then Bank of Ghana. I think in terms of leading the negotiation, Ken is key and fundamental. You have all the technical guys doing all the number crunching and all of that. I think the face of it is also very important. And I think his posture hasn't been helpful. And any delay with the negotiation, any silence would easily be interpreted to mean Ken is not committed. Okay? And that itself would have negative sentiment around the whole program, and this will have a devastating effect on the economy. I think you should give Ghana a chance. He should give the economy a chance. He's done his best. It's probably he meant well for the economy for Ghanaians. But I think at this stage, he should give us a chance.
I'm grateful, Professor Bokwe, grateful, Professor Lord Mensah. Yesterday, we had for the first time the case of the minority against Ken Ofori-Atta. A lot of it hinged on economic details, policies, targets, and regulations that allegedly had been breached. We've been looking at these, and my colleague, data analyst with the research desk, Kofi J, joins me in the studio because we didn't really need to look at the case against the finance minister. We'll be doing some checking of this. Walk us through some of the claims made by the minority yesterday on the committee.
So they made a lot of claims, but we'll go through some. In 2018, according to the minority, governments reported fiscal deficits of 3.9 and excluded expenditure line items worth 9.8 billion Ghana cedis for financial sector payments. According to the minority again, the actual fiscal deficit for 2018 would have exceeded a 5% threshold if you add the 9.8 billion financial sector payments. In 2019, the finance minister, according to the minority, said fiscal deficit was 4.8% of GDP. This excluded 3.1 billion financial sector payments and 5.1 billion energy sector payments. The actual fiscal deficit was supposed to be 7.1% of GDP. And they also said that although the Fiscal Responsibility Act was suspended in 2020, financial sector deficit for that year was reported at 11.7 instead of 17.2, Evans.
Okay, I wonder whether we managed to verify any of these.
So if you look at the IMF document that the minority actually reference, it says that the overall fiscal deficit is expected to reach 7% of GDP in 2019, reflecting cost and unexpected energy amounting to 2.3% of GDP. The overall fiscal deficit will fall to 6.4% in 2020, thanks to lower financial sector cost. So that's according to the IMF.
So it checks out?
Absolutely.
It checks out what the allegation has been. And then there's also breaches of the law, Fiscal Responsibility Act rules that they allegedly.
So if you look at Section 4 of the law, it says that, Parliament, in accordance with Article 82 of the Constitution, passed a vote of censure on the minister, where the finance minister or any minister breaches Section 2 by more than 1 percentage point. So it means that this 5% threshold that we're talking about, if it exceeds by more than 1 percentage point, it means the law has been breached. So according to the IMF, in the Article 4 document, about 2.8 percentage points of GDP in financial energy sector cost in part of the ESLA bonds issued were recorded below the line in 2019. But because the government considers this, financial sector cost as one-off and energy cost as debt amortization, so the IMF says that best international practice would have included the transactions above the line as they reflect either direct, government obligations or government transfers to state-owned enterprises.
So if you include that would breach the regulation.
Exactly. Okay. That would mean it will be more than 7%.
Okay. Kofi, thank you very much. And we'll be doing more of this and looking at some of the facts as have been placed against the finance minister, telling you what we can verify and what we cannot. Newsnight starts in a minute. But first,